By the 18th century, the balance of power in Eastern Europe and the Black Sea region was undergoing a dramatic transformation. A rapidly expanding Russian state emerged as one of the most serious external threats the Ottoman Empire had ever faced. Through a series of devastating Russo-Turkish wars, Russia challenged Ottoman dominance, seized strategic territories, and exposed deep structural weaknesses within the Ottoman military system. These pressures ultimately forced the empire to confront the urgent need for modernization, most notably under the reformist reign of Sultan Selim III. For centuries, the Ottomans had been the dominant military power of the region. Their disciplined armies, effective command structure, and strategic control of key trade routes had secured imperial expansion from Anatolia to the Balkans, the Middle East, and North Africa. However, by the early 1700s, this advantage was eroding. While European states invested in new military technologies, training methods, and centralized command systems, the Ottoman army remained largely bound to older traditions. Russia's rise was driven by deliberate reform. Under rulers determined to modernize, Russia built a professional army, strengthened artillery, expanded naval power, and adopted Western military practices. The Black Sea became a central objective. Access to warm-water ports was vital for trade, naval expansion, and geopolitical influence. This ambition brought Russia into direct conflict with Ottoman interests. The first major clashes revealed an uncomfortable truth. Ottoman forces struggled against Russian armies that were better organized, better supplied, and increasingly better led. Battles that once would have favored the Ottomans now resulted in heavy losses. Fortresses fell, naval engagements exposed technological gaps. Each defeat weakened imperial prestige and emboldened Russia's ambitions. The Russo-Turkish wars of the 18th century were not isolated conflicts, but a continuous cycle of pressure. With each war, Russia extracted concessions. Treaties forced the Ottomans to surrender territory, grant commercial privileges, or recognize Russian influence over Orthodox Christian populations within Ottoman lands. These agreements eroded sovereignty and signaled a shift in regional power. The loss of Crimea marked a turning point. Crimea had long served as a strategic buffer and a symbol of Ottoman authority in the Black Sea. Its gradual detachment from Ottoman control and eventual annexation by Russia sent shockwaves through the empire. For the first time, a Muslim-ruled territory had been permanently lost to a Christian power through diplomatic and military pressure. The psychological impact was profound. Inside the empire, these defeats triggered intense debate. Military failures could no longer be dismissed as temporary setbacks. They pointed to systemic problems: outdated training, ineffective command, corruption, and resistance to change. The Janissary Corps, once the backbone of Ottoman power, had become increasingly undisciplined and politically entrenched. Their opposition to reform made modernization both necessary and dangerous. Economic strain worsened the crisis. Wars were expensive, and repeated defeats drained the treasury. To fund campaigns, the state raised taxes, debased currency, and borrowed heavily. Inflation reduced soldiers' pay in real terms, lowering morale. Civilians bore the burden as prices rose and living conditions declined. Military weakness and economic hardship fed into one another, creating a cycle of decline. By the late 18th century, it was clear that survival required reform. Sultan Selim III emerged as a ruler who recognized the scale of the challenge. He understood that Russia's strength lay not merely in numbers, but in organization, discipline, and modern military science. To confront this reality, he launched a series of ambitious reforms aimed at transforming the Ottoman military. At the center of these efforts was the creation of a new army trained along European lines. This force was equipped with modern weapons, drilled according to contemporary tactics, and supported by technical schools and military advisors. Artillery units were reorganized, naval reforms initiated, and new institutions established to support long-term change. However, modernization came at a high political cost. Traditional military groups viewed these reforms as a threat to their status and privileges. The Janissaries, in particular, feared replacement and loss of influence. Many religious scholars and conservative elites also resisted Western methods, seeing them as incompatible with Ottoman and Islamic traditions. External pressure continued even as reforms progressed. Russia remained aggressive, testing Ottoman defenses and exploiting internal divisions. Each new conflict reinforced the urgency of reform, while each internal rebellion demonstrated how fragile the reform process was. Selim III faced the impossible task of rebuilding the military while maintaining domestic stability. Despite resistance, the reforms represented a significant shift in Ottoman thinking. For the first time, military weakness was openly acknowledged rather than denied. Defeat was analyzed, not excused. European methods were studied, not automatically rejected. This change in mindset marked the beginning of a long, difficult transition toward modernization. Yet the results were mixed. While the new forces showed promise, they were too few to replace the old system quickly. Financial limitations restricted expansion. Political opposition undermined consistency. Ultimately, Selim III's reforms provoked a backlash strong enough to bring about his downfall. Even so, the Russian threat ensured that reform could not be abandoned entirely. Later, rulers would continue, expand, and radicalize these efforts. The military crisis of the 18th century reshaped Ottoman policy, pushing the empire toward centralization, professionalization, and cautious engagement with European models. Russia's rise exposed a fundamental reality. Power in the modern world depended on adaptation. The Ottomans had once dominated through innovation and organization. Their crisis emerged not from weakness alone, but from delayed change. Russia's success lay in its ability to learn, transform, and exploit the vulnerabilities of a once dominant rival. By the end of the century, the Ottoman Empire was no longer the unchallenged power of the Black Sea. Its borders were more fragile, its diplomacy more defensive, and its military reputation damaged. Yet the pressure exerted by Russia also forced a reckoning that would shape Ottoman reform for decades to come. The 18th century thus stands as a moment of confrontation between old systems and new realities. The Russian rise did not merely defeat Ottoman armies, it exposed the cost of stagnation in a rapidly changing world. In response, the empire began a painful but necessary journey toward modernization, one born not of ambition, but of survival.